When Western authorities began tracing the explosion of online scams in Asia, all roads led to one unlikely place: Cambodia. From cryptocurrency fraud and fake investment apps to love scams and digital slavery rings, the money trail pointed toward one empire towering above them all: Prince Group, the billion-dollar conglomerate built by Chinese-born tycoon Chen Zhi. Once hailed as the face of Cambodia's economic miracle, Chen's glittering skyscrapers and casino cities have quietly become the perfect shelter for global crime syndicates. Over the past decade, Cambodia transformed from one of Southeast Asia's poorest nations into a magnet for unchecked Chinese investment. But behind that economic boom, investigators found something darker: scam compounds, trafficking networks, and call centers operating inside luxury properties owned or financed by Prince Group affiliates. Tens of thousands of victims from across Asia, from Malaysia to Taiwan, were trapped inside these so-called tech parks, forced to defraud people online while authorities looked the other way. Now, mounting evidence suggests this wasn't chaos. It was a system enabled by power, money, and silence. One where Chen Zhi's influence helped create the infrastructure that scammers needed to thrive. His empire wasn't just building cities, it was building cover. And the question haunting investigators from Beijing to Washington is this: did Chen Zhi turn Cambodia into a paradise for investors, or into the world's most sophisticated haven for global scammers? Between 2016 and 2020, Cambodia was praised by international observers as one of Asia's fastest-growing economies. Glossy magazines hailed Phnom Penh as the new Shanghai of the Mekong, a place where Chinese investors could build their fortunes without regulation or oversight. And at the center of this sudden transformation stood one man, Chen Zhi, the mysterious Chinese-born businessman who built Prince Group into a sprawling empire that touched every corner of the Cambodian economy: real estate, banking, telecommunications, tourism, and even philanthropy. To the outside world, Chen Zhi was the embodiment of ambition. His group erected skyscrapers in Phnom Penh, glittering hotels in Sihanoukville, and entire residential districts seemingly overnight. He rubbed shoulders with Cambodian ministers, sponsored government events, and made headline-grabbing donations to hospitals and schools. The image was clear: a self-made visionary driving Cambodia's rise. But beneath the surface, Chen's empire was more than a development machine. It was a magnet for unregulated money. In those same years, thousands of Chinese citizens poured into Cambodia. Some were investors, others were construction workers. But mixed among them were members of organized cybercrime rings fleeing crackdowns in China, Malaysia, and Thailand. They found in Cambodia something they couldn't find elsewhere: a government eager for Chinese money and unwilling to ask questions. With real estate booming, no one cared who bought luxury condos or where the cash came from. And Chen Zhi's Prince Group provided the perfect gateway. The conglomerate's real estate projects, from Prince Central Plaza in Phnom Penh to Prince Times Hotel in Sihanoukville, were marketed directly to wealthy Chinese nationals. Transactions were often made in cash or cryptocurrency with little to no documentation required. These properties became havens, not for legitimate investors, but for scammers and money launderers looking to disappear behind Cambodia's glittering new skyline. The city of Sihanoukville became the clearest example. Once a quiet coastal town, it transformed within 5 years into a chaotic labyrinth of casinos, luxury hotels, and gated compounds, many financed by Prince Group affiliates. Behind the neon lights and casino floors, human trafficking and scam networks quietly took root. Chinese gangs, operating under names like Asia Pacific Tech Park or Digital Investment Hub, leased entire buildings from Prince developers to house call centers. Inside, victims were forced to operate online scams that siphoned millions of dollars from unsuspecting victims across the globe. Still, Chen Zhi's public persona remained untouchable. His official biographies described him as a visionary investor contributing to Cambodia's modernization. Local media, often funded by Prince, avoided mentioning the link between his developments and the explosion of cybercrime. The government celebrated the jobs he created, the taxes he paid, and the political donations he made. And while thousands were trafficked through Cambodia's scam compounds, Chen Zhi was photographed receiving national awards for economic contribution. By 2020, Cambodia's so-called miracle economy had a hidden cost. It wasn't fueled by innovation or production, but by dirty money and human exploitation. And whether by design or by negligence, Chen Zhi's empire became the scaffolding that supported it all. The question wasn't how scammers found Cambodia, it was how one man's empire made them feel safe there. As Cambodia's property boom accelerated, Prince Group's developments didn't just reshape skylines, they rewired how money moved through the country. To investigators, the group's luxury condominiums, casinos, and hotel chains weren't just symbols of prosperity. They were perfect laundering vessels, physical vaults for dirty cash dressed up as legitimate investment. At the height of the boom, Chen Zhi's companies offered something no other developer could: anonymity. Buyers could purchase multi-million-dollar properties in cash, often in US dollars, without providing proof of income or identity. Middlemen handled most transactions, transferring titles through proxy owners or offshore firms registered in Hong Kong, Singapore, and the British Virgin Islands. Once the sale was complete, the money trail effectively disappeared. In some cases, the same apartment changed ownership several times in a single week, each transfer accompanied by a sharp price increase, a classic method of layering designed to make illegal funds appear legitimate. The ecosystem thrived because every part of it benefited. Prince Bank, a financial arm of Chen Zhi's empire, facilitated transfers from foreign tech companies, digital consultants, and crypto startups, all of which were later traced to online scam rings and fraud syndicates across Asia. The transactions were disguised as investment inflows, but the sums made no economic sense. Between 2019 and 2021, more than $1.2 billion flowed into Cambodia through entities tied to Prince Group, much of it from jurisdictions already flagged for money laundering. It wasn't only about money. The buildings themselves were ideal for operations that needed privacy. In Phnom Penh's financial district, entire floors of Prince-built towers were rented out to marketing agencies and call centers. Security guards, hired by Prince subsidiaries, controlled access to the buildings. Tenants paid in cash, used encrypted messaging apps, and left no official record of occupancy. When police raids occasionally took place, the offices were already cleared, computers wiped, and tenants gone. It was a game of cat and mouse, except the mouse lived inside a fortress built by one of the richest men in the country. Real estate also offered a way to absorb criminal profits into Cambodia's economy. Scam operators from China and Malaysia would invest their illicit earnings into high-end apartments and casinos, often using cryptocurrency converted through Phnom Penh's growing underground exchanges. Some even launched joint ventures with local firms under Prince's development umbrella. These ventures acted as financial sponges, taking in capital from scam operations and redistributing it as legitimate corporate revenue. By the time the money re-entered the global banking system, it was indistinguishable from any other foreign investment. The laundering process was elegant in its simplicity. Dirty money bought real estate, the property's value inflated, ownership shifted to offshore companies, the property was resold to foreign investors, the profits appeared clean. In effect, Chen Zhi's real estate empire became a washing machine for the region's cybercrime profits. Yet, despite red flags raised by international watchdogs, Cambodia's regulators remained silent. Financial institutions were required to report suspicious transactions, but few ever did, especially when they involved Prince Group or its subsidiaries. Insiders later revealed that local bankers were instructed not to question VIP accounts, particularly those linked to Chinese investors. By 2022, the pattern was impossible to ignore. While ordinary Cambodians struggled to afford homes, entire luxury towers in Phnom Penh and Sihanoukville sat empty, owned on paper by offshore entities, in reality by crime syndicates, using Chen Zhi's empire as their personal bank. The Prince Group's real estate boom didn't just launder money, it laundered reputation. It gave cybercriminals legitimacy, safety, and a new kind of sanctuary, one built not on secrecy, but on opulence. By 2021, the illusion of Cambodia's miracle economy had shattered. What had once been celebrated as a real estate success story was now being exposed as a criminal sanctuary, where traffickers, scammers, and corrupt investors operated under the gleaming banners of luxury development. And in the middle of this growing nightmare stood Chen Zhi's Prince Group, its buildings, and political reach, quietly repurposed into the infrastructure of global crime. It started with whispers from those who managed to escape. Survivors rescued from Sihanoukville's scam compounds described being trafficked across borders, stripped of their passports, and forced to run online scams targeting victims across the US, Europe, and China. They were told they were working for investment firms or tech startups, but inside these compounds were rows of computers and men with guns. Many of these compounds were traced back to Prince-developed properties or projects financed through its affiliates. In several cases, the addresses matched Prince real estate registration documents. The scam syndicates ran with military precision. Inside Phnom Penh and Sihanoukville, entire office floors were transformed into fraud command centers. Victims were trained to impersonate financial advisors, cryptocurrency traders, or romantic partners to lure money from strangers online, the now infamous pig butchering scams. To outsiders, these buildings were ordinary office towers, often with Prince branding still visible on the facade. Inside, they were digital prisons guarded by armed men. When international organizations like Interpol and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, began investigating, they found Cambodia's criminal landscape uniquely structured, a blend of corporate legitimacy and criminal exploitation. Unlike in Myanmar or Laos, where syndicates hid in the jungle, Cambodia's scam empire operated in plain sight, under chandeliers and marble floors. That visibility was its protection. Multiple investigative reports from 2022 revealed that the scam network's leaders had close ties to Chinese businessmen who were either investors or tenants in Prince-owned developments. Some of them even appeared at public charity events hosted by the Prince Foundation. Government documents confirmed that several of these individuals held investment partner visas, a category often granted through Prince Group's development projects. They weren't fugitives, they were foreign investors, operating with official blessing. Local journalists who tried to expose these links faced censorship or threats. Cambodian news outlets dependent on Prince Group advertising quickly learned which topics were off-limits. One former editor recalled being told, "We can write about the victims, not the buildings." Meanwhile, Chen Zhi maintained his spotless public image, funding donations to schools, hospitals, and religious events, even as foreign embassies privately warned their citizens to avoid Cambodia's scam zones. The irony was chilling. The same government officials who praised Chen Zhi for boosting development were turning a blind eye to the slave-like labor inside his properties. In a confidential diplomatic cable leaked in 2023, one Southeast Asian ambassador described Prince Group's developments as modern castles built on human misery. Yet, despite mounting evidence, there were no arrests, no sanctions, no accountability. Prince's empire had become what criminals called the bubble, a safe ecosystem where illegal operations could flourish as long as the money kept flowing. The combination of Chen Zhi's influence, real estate opacity, and political protection turned Cambodia into a global scam hub disguised as an investment paradise. By then, it was clear the Prince Group hadn't just benefited from the scammers' money, it had built the world they lived in. As stories of trafficking, online fraud, and torture inside Cambodian compounds began to make international headlines, the expectation was that the government would step in, that the revelations would finally break the cycle of corruption and silence. But what followed was something far more disturbing: nothing. The Cambodian authorities issued brief statements denying widespread abuse, promising further investigations, and then moved on as if nothing had happened. In the meantime, the Prince Group continued to sponsor government events, donate to ministries, and build new luxury projects. The empire that had become synonymous with exploitation remained untouchable. Chen Zhi had spent years building his political armor, and it worked flawlessly. His conglomerate had become one of the largest private donors to state-led initiatives, pouring millions into public hospitals, religious institutions, and even the National COVID-19 Fund. These high-profile donations came with photo opportunities featuring top government officials smiling beside him. The message was clear. Prince Group wasn't a suspect. It was a partner. Behind closed doors, internal communications from the Prince Foundation showed a meticulous strategy. Philanthropy was to be used as a shield of goodwill. Each donation bought more silence, more access, and more protection. When foreign journalists began linking Prince-built properties to scam networks, the company launched a PR blitz, emphasizing Chen Zhi's charitable contributions and labeling the reports as anti-investment propaganda. Local newspapers, many reliant on Prince advertising, echoed the same narrative. Government complicity ran deeper than mere inaction. Investigators discovered that several senior Cambodian officials owned shares in Prince-affiliated real estate projects or served as advisors on Chen Zhi's corporate boards. Police raids were announced but rarely carried out, and when they were, the targets were low-level operators, never landlords or developers. Whistleblowers from within Cambodia's National Committee for Anti-Trafficking described their frustration. Every time we traced a compound back to Prince ownership, the order came to stop. They said it was a diplomatic matter. That diplomatic matter was China. Phnom Penh's close relationship with Beijing made Chen Zhi's position even stronger. His company was seen as a bridge between Chinese investors and the Cambodian state, advancing Beijing's economic influence while enriching Cambodia's elite. For Cambodian leaders, clamping down on Prince risked alienating one of their most valuable partners, both financially and politically. As one government insider put it, "You can't arrest your banker." International pressure mounted. Reports from the United Nations, Interpol, and human rights organizations painted Cambodia as a central hub for modern slavery and cyber fraud. Western governments issued travel warnings, while Beijing, facing embarrassment over the number of Chinese victims, quietly began to repatriate some trafficked citizens. Yet Phnom Penh remained silent. Instead of dismantling the system, the government chose to rebrand the narrative. State media portrayed the crackdown on smaller scam operators as proof that Cambodia was cleaning house. But the larger networks, the ones tied to powerful developers and political figures, were left untouched. The result was a dangerous equilibrium. The scammers stayed, the government looked away, and Prince Group thrived. the brand continued to expand into banking, telecommunications, and even digital finance, positioning itself as a leader in sustainable innovation. To the world, it was progress. To those inside the country, it was a masterclass in legalized corruption. By 2024, Cambodia had become what one UN investigator described as a state-sponsored scam economy, its institutions hollowed out by dependence on dirty money. And at its center stood Chen Zhi, philanthropist, tycoon, and architect of an empire so deeply intertwined with government power that the line between state and syndicate no longer existed. By 2024, Cambodia's transformation under Chen Zhi's shadow was complete. What had started as a national development boom had evolved into a blueprint for state-enabled cybercrime, one that other regions in Asia were beginning to imitate. The Prince Group no longer needed to hide its reach. It had successfully fused the roles of developer, banker, and political broker into a single machine, one that laundered money, legitimized criminals, and reshaped an entire country's reputation. Even as human trafficking raids made international headlines, Chen Zhi's empire continued to expand outward. While Cambodia's scam compounds thrived, new shell companies were being incorporated in Singapore, Dubai, and the British Virgin Islands, all linked to former Prince executives. These entities began acquiring stakes in tech startups, green energy projects, and logistics firms, businesses that, on paper, had nothing to do with real estate. But to financial analysts, the pattern was unmistakable. The same capital extraction model that fueled Cambodia's dirty economy was being exported abroad. Chen Zhi's move into digital finance was particularly revealing. Prince Bank quietly launched blockchain-based investment platforms advertised as secure financial ecosystems for international clients. In reality, investigators believe these platforms were used to convert scam profits into crypto assets, obscuring their origins before re-injecting them into the legitimate market. It was a seamless evolution from physical towers to digital vaults, allowing the empire's money to move faster, farther, and more invisibly than ever before. Meanwhile, Prince's propaganda machine turned the narrative upside down. In televised interviews, Chen Zhi presented himself as a reformer determined to fight fraud and protect Cambodia's image. His foundation funded anti-trafficking campaigns, sponsored police conferences, and even pledged support for ethical business practices. Yet, at the same time, newly registered Prince-linked companies were leasing office space in Phnom Penh's satellite districts, the same neighborhoods where scam networks were still operating behind tinted glass and private security gates. It was a dual reality, one for public consumption, another for profit. Regional experts began calling Cambodia the Silicon Valley of scams. From Myanmar's Kokang region to Laos's Golden Triangle, criminal groups now viewed Cambodia as a model for how corruption, investment, and technology could coexist. The Prince model, build legitimate assets, rent them to criminals, wash the proceeds through offshore accounts, was being replicated under new names. And through it all, Chen Zhi's network remained the silent architect, expanding its influence through offshore reinvestment and strategic partnerships disguised as foreign ventures. Diplomatically, Phnom Penh doubled down on denial. When foreign journalists confronted officials about Chen Zhi's alleged role, they pointed to his awards and donations, insisting that Prince has done more good than harm. Even Beijing, embarrassed by the growing number of Chinese victims trafficked into Cambodia, avoided directly criticizing him. Instead, Chinese state media quietly shifted the blame to independent criminal organizations, careful never to mention Prince or its affiliates. By now, the system had learned to survive exposure. The more the world reported on the scam crisis, the more sophisticated the networks became. Victims were relocated to new compounds, companies changed names, money rerouted through crypto hubs. And just as international investigators began to connect the dots, Chen Zhi announced another philanthropic campaign, this time to promote financial transparency and international cooperation. It was almost theatrical. A man accused of enabling global fraud, now positioning himself as its greatest reformer. For many, the story of Prince Group had stopped being about one company. It had become a lesson in power, how corruption, once institutionalized, can evolve into governance itself. Cambodia wasn't just hosting criminals, it was hosting an economy built on their survival. And as Chen Zhi expanded his reach into the Middle East and Africa, investing in tech corridors and free trade zones, a haunting question emerged among investigators. If he could turn one nation into a sanctuary for scammers, what's stopping him from doing it again, somewhere bigger, richer, and even more blind? By 2025, Cambodia had become more than a country of opportunity. It had become a case study in how power protects profit. Behind every glittering Prince Tower stood stories of debt, coercion, and human misery. The kingdom that once dreamed of becoming Asia's next Singapore had instead been transformed into a haven where global scammers operated in luxury, untouched by law and shielded by influence. And at the top of that gilded pyramid sat Chen Zhi, a man whose empire blurred the boundaries between business, politics, and organized crime, even as victims continued to escape from compounds in Sihanoukville and Phnom Penh. The same buildings reopened under new names, backed by the same developers. The cycle of denial and reinvention continued, proving that corruption doesn't collapse, it adapts. Chen Zhi's empire had evolved into something larger than a corporation, a system of silence that stretched from Cambodia's ministries to offshore banks in Dubai. For the outside world, Cambodia's glittering skyline still represents progress. But to those who've looked closer, it's a mirage, a facade built to conceal how a nation's development dream became a criminal business model. And so the question remains, when a billionaire can turn a sovereign state into a sanctuary for the world's scammers, who, exactly, is running the country? Because in Cambodia's new economy, power isn't measured by law or ethics. It's measured by who controls the crime.